Hi there, I am the Reverend Danny Crosby, a Unitarian minister serving congregations in Altrincham and in Urmston in the northwest of England. And I offer you this devotion as a balm for the heart, for the mind, for the spirit and for the soul. And it's titled, Do unto future generations as you would have had the past generations do unto us. How to become good ancestors. I've just been away at the Ministers' Conference and our annual general meetings of our Unitarian and Free Christian in Great Britain denomination, UK and Ireland denomination, and it was a really wonderful week away. I came home inspired and uplifted with hope for the future of what Unitarian ministry might yet become. It was a really inspiring time. Now, as I'd set off at the beginning of the week, I noticed that the cherry blossom trees were close to flowering here in the gardens at the chapel. And I was only gone 5 days, and yet when I returned, I was greeted by them in full bloom. What a beautiful sight to behold. Now I know that they do not last, and no doubt if they were always there, they would lose some of their beauty. That said, while they are around, they touch my heart deeply. I love to share pictures of them with friends, and I encourage them to do likewise. It is a lovely, lovely game to play, and I find it beautifully connective. A friend even sent me a video of him in Japan, surrounded by falling cherry blossom. And the Japanese love cherry blossom. They worship it. They have a kind of religious festival, holding it in great reverence every year. Now, also while I was away, another friend came and planted sunflowers here in the chapel garden. He has done so every single year ever since COVID. I think I told you about it on a previous devotion that I shared. He plants in remembrance of his father who died from COVID right at the beginning of the pandemic, 4 years ago now. He plants the flowers on the anniversary of his dad's death. His father loved gardening, and my friend Rob has now become a keen gardener, obsessed almost actually. He also goes and tends his father's grave lovingly almost every single day. It is as beautiful a grave as you will see in the southern cemetery, probably the most beautiful grave and cared for and tended to grave in the whole of Greater Manchester. I bet there's none finer. Now my friend told me he was flying home to Zambia with his partner, the home of his father, where his father came from. Since his father died, he has felt a deeper connection to his ancestors, whilst also taking on a greater responsibility for those that follow him. He wants to leave a legacy. Like his dad, he wants to be remembered as a good ancestor, to carry on his father's legacy for future generations to share. He tells me all the time that his father's keeping him on the straight and narrow, even now, long after he has died. And I've been thinking a lot about ancestors of late. I even did an ancestry test. I sent off my DNA. I was inspired by two friends who were trying to find their fathers. They did not know really who their fathers were. Now I have no doubt who my dad is, or was. I saw him clearly actually on an old video my auntie recently sent me. I sound just like him, well if I still smoke 40 a day anyway. And I look a lot like him, although he was much younger than I am now when he died. I share some of his features. I also share features from my maternal side of the family. I can see myself in both my mum and my maternal granddad. And there are other legacies of both sides of my family in me, in my body, in my hands, in my being. I carry these people in me and from the generations past, many gone past, many generations past. People love learning about their family history. My own mum is an expert in genealogy, self-trained really. She's been doing it 40 years, if not longer. She loves to help people research their own family histories, and she's developed their own skills really over the years. So many people have a fascination with the past, with their past, where they came from. I do wonder though why we don't have the same emotional attachment to those who will follow us, those who will look at us as their ancestors. Will we be good ancestors to them? I I wonder. The modern day gurus, the present day gurus perhaps, tell us that we should not focus too much on the past and certainly not too much on the future. That only now exists, which is true of course. But I've noticed there can be an over-obsession with the now that can lead to a certain level of self-centeredness, a certain level of self-focus. I have discovered it's not just about living in the moment, but how, not passively living in the moment if you like, but how we live in the time and the space that we find ourselves in today. And to truly see that this time and this space is connected to all that has been and all that will ever be. That we and the way that we inhabit time and space right now in the moment really does matter, for it affects all that follows. It's not that we live passively in the moment, but it's more about bringing the moment that we live in today alive. And thus, in so doing, if we live in the best way possible, we create a legacy for those that will follow us. It's about bringing alive the moments in which we find ourselves. You see, our ancestors are still alive within us, still speaking to us as we live. We hear them, we feel them sometimes. They left their mark on our lives. So our task is to become good ancestors, for it matters the mark that we will leave behind, for it will impact on those who follow. It matters how we live now, a moment in the history of life, a vital part in the chain of existence. Now, at the recent General Assembly meetings I attended, the Kino speech, the John Raleigh Beard lecture, as it's described, was delivered by Roman Krznaric, an author and speaker, what you might call a modern-day public philosopher, if you like. It was a wonderful speech. He's the author of, amongst many other books, a book called The Good Ancestor. And he talked that day on this very subject, how to be a good ancestor. In his book, The Good Ancestor, it's a kind of critique of short-term thinking and the problems caused by only thinking about our immediate time and place. And this is the case on a personal level, but also in the public sphere too. He suggests that our attention spans as human beings are shrinking at exactly the moment in world history when our actions and our decisions will have the most profound, imaginable impacts on future generations of people and potentially all life on Earth. That this is not good to think this way, to vastly understate the situation in which we find ourselves. Suggesting that we are like people who are eating seeds that we should be planting, not because we are starving, but because we're bored, we don't know how to live. Our life lacks meaning, we're anxious, we're utterly addicted to instant gratification, we have no patience, we want what we want and we want it now. Patience is a virtue that's gone the way of the dodo, it would seem. Our obsession with our time and place has fed our self-centeredness and it's shrunk our lives into tiny little units, and it's dissatisfying. Krznaric suggests that our troubles, both personal and collective, are due to short-term thinking, that we need to be guided into long-term thinking, that our horizons need to be lengthened, that we need to be thinking about the consequences not only within our lifetimes, or our children's lifetimes, but in the centuries down the line. This is the call that is issued by what's called the seventh generation principle, a philosophy developed by the Iroquois Native American people that says decisions we make today should be beneficial and sustainable for 7 generations. We need to think about the 7th generation that will follow us. The way that Roman Krznaric puts it is that what we need to develop is what he describes as a modified, a lengthened, if you like, golden rule. And it goes something like this. Do unto future generations as you would have had past generations do unto you. And this idea is perfectly exemplified in the question that he puts to the world, a provocative quote at the beginning of his book from the immunologist, the inventor of the vaccine for polio actually, a man named Jonas Salk, who said, the most important question we must ask ourselves is, are we being good ancestors? Roman believes that we can return to long-term thinking, that it requires a change of mindset, because we once used to live that way. And he points to lots of examples of what he described as the legacy mindset projects. Projects that don't pay off immediately, pay off in generations to come actually. Such as the 135-year-old Sagrada Familia Church that's still being built now in Barcelona, or the Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Norway, or the sewers in London, which helped generations much later and still work today, despite London being 150 years later and London being the city that it is now. But they didn't just think about their immediate need. And what he really talks about is something that I've shared about before, and something I think is really important, what's called the Long Now Foundation, particularly their concept of the 10,000-year-old clock. I love the concept of the Long Now clock, something I have talked about in the past. It's the creation of Danny Hills of the Long Now Foundation. And he's been working on creating a long time clock as a kind of practical symbol of the long now living. The idea is to create a clock that will last 10,000 years. Human society, as it's understood, has existed for 10,000 years, and the idea is to put our current place at the halfway point of this. On the face of it, it seems like a crazy idea. How can a machine last this long even? But its purpose is to get us to think about the future, to consider our place in the chain of ancestors. It may help us transcend the selfish thinking that keeps us enslaved in our time and in our space. For such short-term thinking can be destructive not only to the future, but to we who live now, for it sucks the meaning out of our lives if we just live for ourselves in this moment. When we think of ancestors, we think about those who have gone before us, those who made our lives what our lives are today. But there's still something self-centered in that thinking, like it was all done for we who live in this moment, like the whole of history is about what happens now. It's just to create our time and space. This kind of thinking leads us to not thinking of the legacy that we will leave behind now. I believe that it is better to think of ancestors in a continuum of time that includes both the past and the future, because we live in a continuum of generations. Our generation builds on the next and 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 on the next, and so on, so on, so on. In a very real way, we are the ancestors of the future. It's not a romantic notion, it's a fact, to be honest. Whether we are conscious of it or not, the lives we are now living are laying down cultural and ecological tracks that will define the lives of the future generations. How will future generations look back at us when we're long gone? Will they say that we were good ancestors? Or did we consume the harvest so there was nothing left for them? Being a good ancestor and thinking of ourselves as part of the chain of life brings me back to a verse really from Luke's Gospel, from what's often called the Sermon on the Plain. It shares parallels with the better known Sermon on the Mount from Matthew's Gospel. Very similar phrases shared, but with a different emphasis really, as Luke and Matthew's Gospel do have a different emphasis. And it's the verse in chapter 6, verse 23 that really strikes me about what I'm talking about. I think it's got something to say about being a good ancestor. It goes something like this. Rejoice ye in that day, and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven. For in the like manner did their fathers unto the prophets. The word rejoice here is originally from the word hedi, which carries the images of being poked or pricked by something, of being led or guided by somewhere by something more than ourselves. The words translated leap for joy are from the Aramaic word dat, which means to live in abundance or to be transported with joy by abundant energy. The word for reward here is from the Aramaic agra, which refers to wages, a fee for service or for hire. Its roots show movement that is continued, that brings a being back to itself. This presents a beautiful image of the real reward suggested in the Gospel accounts, which is the knowledge and the realization of our original divine image or our reflection of God, created by the Holy One at the very beginning in that first book of Genesis, what I have come to call original blessing, which is the story of creation. Not original sin, original blessing, that we are made in that image of the divine and that we have a responsibility to this life, this created life. And it links all generations together from the beginning until the end of time. And I see something of the long now clock in this verse, in this message from 2,000 years ago. It speaks today. In living this story of being part of the creation, this is what's been described in the gospel accounts, certainly Matthew, Mark and Luke, as well as the non-canonical gospel of Thomas. It's this idea of creating this kingdom, the kingdom of love, of being prophets of love. And the word for prophet in Aramaic, nabiyah, does not mean one who foretells the future. That's not what they mean. But rather a person who listens to the divine voice within. That calm, that voice of calm. That love that passeth all understanding. And to act upon that love, that voice. And in so doing, we become a good prophet. And to be a good prophet is to be a good ancestor. One who lives as part of the continuing creation, linked to the beginning and the end of time. One who listens to the divine voice within and acts on this voice as part of the ongoing creation that we all play our role wherever we find ourselves on the continuum. That's how to be a good ancestor. Connected to the past, living fully alive in the present and creating a legacy for the future. Being a good steward of the creation, I guess. And that's what it means. That's prophetic living. That's what it means to be a prophet. One who listens and lives from that divine voice in the moment as part of the continuum of life, creating a legacy for the future, being a good ancestor. That's what prophetic living is. To be a good ancestor is to see yourself as a part of the creation of life, to see your future self as yourself, to be an ancestor of your future self, or as Roman Krznaric put it, do unto future generations as you would have had past generations do unto you. To be a good ancestor is to live fully alive in this life now, to love this time and this place. Yes, to be fully present in it now, to love, honour and to respect it, to cherish it, to be a bride or a bridegroom to it. In so doing, we might just become the good ancestors that we would like to be. In so doing, we become the ancestors of our own future. We create our present at the same time, and at the same time we write our legacy with each feeling, with each thought, with each action, with each word, with each and every breath. The legacy that we leave is the one we live right now. In so doing, we become good ancestors. For everything matters. How we live now matters, just as how those who lived before us, they matter too. For all life is connected, all life is interconnected, past, present and future. So how we live today will affect what is yet to come. So let us do unto future generations as we would have had past generations do unto us. Amen. And I'm going to end with some final words of blessing. For we need to bless more. We can all bless. We bless by giving ourselves wholeheartedly to life, by becoming blessings for those who follow, by blessing the time and space we live in now. So, let us bless and keep one another. Let kindness rule in our hearts and compassion in our lives. Let us bless our world wholeheartedly. Let us become good ancestors. Let us do unto future generations as we would have had past generations do unto us. And may the love of God hold us and sustain us, and may it do so in all that we feel, in all that we think, in all that we say, in all that we do. Go in love, go in peace. Amen.